naked American man stole my balloon. Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and I'm with my good buddy Ty Franck and my new good buddy Christopher Buehlman, big friend of the podcast and becoming one of my favorite authors. We're excited to have you, and we're having you today because it's a special occasion, because today we're going to do one of our favorite movies, and it's American Werewolf in London. The reason we're going to have you on is because Ty and I just read recently Those Across the River, and I fucking love the book. American Werewolf in London is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, which is probably one of my favorite movies of all time, what you just said earlier. But I'm not a huge fan of werewolf movies. But when werewolves are done right, I'm a massive fan of that. There's something special and fascinating about it, and that's what your novel does. The culture of the werewolf in your novel, the small southern town, World War I, the taking place during the Depression, it was phenomenal. And
Thank you.
And Ty, you just read the book, right? You just finished it.
Yeah, I just read it last week because I had to fly out to California, and I read it on the 2 flights.
What you were saying earlier about how you don't like many werewolf films, I agree. I don't like a lot of them either because it's a really easy thing to fuck up. It's kind of a ridiculous monster when you think about it. It really pushes willing suspension of disbelief right up against the wall. Like you got a guy and he's gonna just turn into a wolf now once a month, and apply various kinds of lore to that. But it's kind of dumb. But when it's done right, there really is something spooky about it. I think it taps into a lot of subconscious stuff for us.
See, now I love werewolf. I think you two people are crazy. There's something, I find werewolves much more interesting than like vampires and zombies, and the idea of that primal power. I mean, a vampire who seduces you and bites your neck doesn't scare me. Something that can chase me through the woods faster than I can run, depending on the lore, is very difficult to kill. That was one thing in your book. It's the classic werewolf who needs silver to be killed.
Right.
The movie we're about to talk about, American Werewolf in London, you can just shoot him with bullets. I'm less scared of things I can just shoot with bullets. Bears are really scary, but I have a 12 gauge. I can take out a bear. I'm not that worried about the bear.
It'll take, with the 12 gauge,
a 12 gauge slug will drop a bear, no problem.
It'll take it depends on if a black bear, maybe a grizzly bear, you're going to have to take a few shots, or it's going to have to be very strategically shot at.
Yeah, but it's a thing that you could shoot multiple times with a 12 gauge and it just gets up and its body heals almost instantly. That's pretty scary to me, because I'm very scared of things that my normal defenses don't work against. Like a guy chasing you with a knife isn't scary. A guy chasing you with a knife who can't be killed is scary.
Yeah, I may have expressed myself poorly. It's a difficult monster to believe in, but I still think it's the coolest monster. So yeah, it's just a fucked up idea. It's just not very
it's
plausible.
Often done very poorly. Often.
That
so
too.
that part, I totally agree with you guys. I mean, and not only is American Werewolf, I'm sure we'll get into the movie in a second, but not only is it an example of a well done werewolf movie, which is unusual, but it's an example of one of the most unusual genres to be well done, which is the horror comedy.
Yes.
You can count on one hand the number of horror comedies that work, right? It's a pretty rare genre. So to nail a well-done werewolf and to nail horror comedy in the same movie makes it pretty rare.
But before we jump into American Werewolf in London, I'm really curious, because those Across the River was your first novel. What specifically about that idea made you want to attack that first, for the first thing you write? Like, what is the background about it, the history?
It's a monster that I've always been fascinated with. It's just, I guess I hadn't come around to think about what an implausible monster it is until later. But my whole childhood and young adulthood, it was always going to be the first horror story I wrote was going to be a werewolf novel. And honestly, I don't want to step on any toes here, but part of the reason I wrote it was because I sort of saw an empty space on the shelf for it. You know, like I was hard pressed to think of a werewolf novel I found scary. So I wanted to try to do that. I challenged myself, said, take this monster, take this fucked up monster, and make it as scary as you can. So
you didn't find the Stephanie Meyer werewolves in Twilight terrifying?
You know, I said what I said.
Those are werewolves you want to fuck. So you can't be scared of. So
let me ask you this, Christopher, because I'm curious. Did you ever read the Kitty Norville books? I'm curious if you would like those. Kitty Norville is a character. I think she has about a dozen books. They're written by a friend of mine named Carrie Vaughn. It's Carrie trying to write werewolves that make logical sense in the modern age. How they would live, how their societies would form, and sort of the rules they would have to live by in order to survive in a world where everybody has guns and it's really easy to make silver bullets. I think if you're looking for stuff on the shelf, that might be a place to look.
Okay, yeah.
But she's usually not going for scary. She's usually going for more sort of like I don't even know I guess it's what's the new thing, the
urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy kind of version, yeah.
Yeah.
What about time and setting?
I was going to segue right into that because when he mentioned his friend's books, I set this in 1935 because that was the last time period I felt that I could plausibly isolate a town. You know, have a town feel like it was under siege.
Yeah, but it's interesting though because there are some towns that here down in South Georgia that are still that remind me very much, and don't say anything about racism, Ty, but still very much remind me of your book and your story I've driven
through those towns.
It fascinates me.
Yeah, that's like there's like one store in the town, and it's everything. It's the hardware store, it's the post office, it's the video rental store. It's like the one thing, and then there's two churches and there's a bar, and that's it. I've driven through those towns.
And there's that fear of outsiders. There's that distrust. One thing that I thought was really authentic about the book is somehow Franck got accepted because he has family ties, like in the thing. So he was able to kind of come play checkers. But the two homeless guys, when they come, it's like they shun those boys. They don't look right, and certain things like that. And so that was fascinating. But we could talk about this book for hours. And one day when you come visit Georgia, we will talk about it for hours. But we're going to talk about American Werewolf in London. So this is always interesting to me to talk about your first experience with the movie. Like, where were you? Did you go see it in the theater? And then what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I went to see it with my dad in 1981 in the theater, and I was 12. Or was it 80? 81, I think. Whatever year it was. I think I was 12, and I remember my dad was driving his little Dodge Omni, and Juice Newton was playing on the radio. And
what a good memory.
Yeah, and it was in St. Petersburg, Florida. It was a Fifth Avenue cinema. It's gone now, but one of those big old cinemas where they only have two screens in it. I just loved it. I just couldn't believe what I'd seen. That was part of my process of being absolutely wrecked and ruined as any kind of a normal human being by early exposure to horror. So, I mean, between Stephen King and the fact that my parents were of a generation that didn't understand how a preteen might abuse cable being in the house. I saw a lot of shit in my eye holes. I probably shouldn't have had in my eye holes.
Yep.
Yeah, parents were like, all of these movies I watched with my dad as well. Like, the parents did not have filters like they do now. And I'm kind of that generation. Like we talk about on the podcast. I show my kids movies that maybe other people think are wrong, but they were so important to me growing up, and I want to share that with them. And I don't know, I just have a high tolerance for things like that. What about you, Ty?
It was definitely a blockbuster rental for me. It was probably 4 or 5 years after it came out, maybe even a little longer. But it was definitely high school.
The store? Was Blockbuster around then?
Well, I mean, maybe it wasn't Blockbuster, but it was whatever video store we had. It was back then. It was probably the gas station that also rented videos. It was being at a friend's house. They were like, have you ever seen this movie? No, I haven't. They're like, okay, we got to watch it. And they rented it. Because, of course, we were never going to watch a movie like that at my house with my crazy religious parents.
No. This movie? No.
They were never going to watch a movie like that at my house. But at my friend's house, he was like, yeah, let's get it. So we watched it at his house, trying to hide it from his parents. And, it was awesome. It was one, like, I remember there were movies, like, even as a kid, I understood the cinematic difference between, like, a little tube TV and a big movie screen. I understood why some things work better on one or the other. And there were plenty of movies that I watched that I didn't care which one I'd seen at first. And there's a few where you watch it the first time on a tube TV, you go, God, I wish I had seen this at the theater.
Yeah.
And this was one where I'm like watching, I'm going, man, I wish I had seen this at the theater. Because London is very shot very wide scale. And just the look of it and all the richness of the cinematography. Even as a teenager who didn't know shit about cinematography, I'm like, God, I wish I had seen this at a theater. Yeah, it's Blade Runner is another one like that, where you see it on TV and you're like, God, I wish I had seen this at the theater.
Yeah.
My first memory of this, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, but I was with my dad, and we were I don't know if we were at a friend's house or like a family's house. I barely remember it, but I remember American Werewolf in London was on in the background as everybody was talking, and I don't know if it was like a Christmas gift or whatever. It was on cable at the time, so this is probably significantly after it came out. And I remember just being captivated, and I remember seeing bits and pieces, and the only thing I can remember seeing was the Piccadilly Massacre part, and seeing the thing, and I was like, what the fuck is this movie? Like, I remember like wishing everybody would just leave the house and I could sit and watch the movie, and then I was transfixed. And, one of the things that we talk about, and there was a time when we were growing up where you could be fascinated in a movie, and then there was no YouTube. There was no, your parents had to take you to the video store, and it was not accessible. Like, it was hard to get. And so then you would talk about it with your friends and be like, have you seen this movie? I don't know the name of it, but I know there was a guy that was a werewolf and he was in London. And they'd be like, oh, American Werewolf in London. And then maybe they saw bits and pieces of it. And so it was one of those movies that was like a unicorn for me that I was like trying to get a hold of, and it was on cable that month, and I'd always check, and every now and then it would be on. You're like, it's on, and I would catch bits and pieces of the movie until eventually at one point I got to go and rent American Werewolf in London and watch the whole movie from beginning to end. The thing about this movie, and I kind of wrote down the things that I think make it special for me. But first, I've just never seen anything like it, and I'm sure there was horror comedy before this, but we were talking about Young Frankenstein earlier. Usually it tips more into comedy and it's kind of like with a backdrop of horror. This one is genuinely funny and genuinely scary at the time, and the way that it slips out, and I didn't see anything like that. Do you guys remember anything with that tone before
I can
this?
remember plenty of things with that tone, but they came way after it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, anything before, it was the first time I saw something like this.
It's hard for me to think of a horror comedy, but I can think of like one of my other favorite movies that can arguably be said to be, dark drama as well as comedy, and both work really well, is In Bruges. Mm-hmm. And I think that, even though it's not horror, has some of the same DNA in that it goes from being ridiculously funny to really dark and dramatic,
It came out quite a number of years after this, though.
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to think of something before this that had that tone.
I didn't get you.
Yeah,
okay.
I know. I'm not saying you needed to think of that. I'm trying to think of something. Then there's stuff that was technically horror comedy that was way more on the comedy side, like Young Frankenstein, right? Which is basically a comedy with that uses some horror tropes.
Abbott and Costello movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, and yeah, exactly. But ones that effectively did horror and comedy, I can't think of one before American Werewolf.
So the opening sequence is my favorite opening sequence of any movie of all time. And I think that because the way that it opens when they're in the back of the truck of the sheep, and it's like, strong, I hit you over the head with a metaphor. But when they're walking and they're talking, like, it's almost like it relaxes you. You're like, oh, I know what this is. It's funny, and they go to this thing. And then when the wolf attacks, the type of horror that it is, you're like, whoa, it fucking floors you because you were not prepared for it, because you haven't seen anything like that up to that point. we have this subconscious mechanism that can kind of tap into genre. So you're watching and you're like, oh, you just get a feeling. You're like, okay, I know what genre this is. And then you relax. And then when you relax, even when they're in the slaughtered lamb and they're in, you know, they're all the foreshadowing and everything that happens in there, you're still not prepared for fucking and he's like, ah, and the blood spurting everywhere, and you're like, holy shit.
And the feathers from the down. The fucking feathers like snow coming around from the down vest that just got torn apart. And when he's laying there under the spotlight of the full moon, I was reminded of what are those shitty pamphlets that a lot of evangelicals will leave on toilets? The Chick, is it Chick? Anyway.
Oh yeah, Jack Chick tracks. Yeah,
those fucking things. But they always would show like a dead person, like who didn't come to Jesus in time, in this same kind of stark. There's their body, and you know they're going to go to hell now. It hit some of that. There was this sense of like operatic tragedy that just happened to this dude, and it was brilliant, just brilliant.
And then in David's reaction, where it's like, it comes out, and he just fucking, it's just like him just fucking. And he's just fucking hauling ass. It's like, yes, that's what you would do.
Yes.
And then halfway through it, he's like, fuck, Jack. And then he turns around and goes back. So now you know, like, he's a good dude. He's a good man, you know?
Yeah.
It was just so picture perfect. And then, and that's the first, so you have it contrast with like, while he's eating him, and it's so loud and it's so violent. And then, and it's quiet as you're running with him, as he's running away from the thing.
And how well did they do it when they're first hearing the noises and it's circling them? You know, they start to realize, like, what the fuck is that? You know?
And that howl is like so eerie. So I wrote down like what makes this movie. I always think about like, why is this movie so special? Why is it hypnotize me every time it's on? I love it so much. I have number one, the opening sequence until Jack gets killed. The tone is genuinely funny and scary. A naked American man stole my balloon. Like that whole thing is just straight up comedy. Rick Baker, the werewolf, the transformation scene. I've never seen a werewolf like that. The transformation and everything. And we'll go back and talk about each one. But also the psychic transformation. So him seeing like the demon Nazis. It's almost like the werewolf. I haven't seen a transformation where the werewolf is invading his subconscious. The evil is, and so you have the metaphor of the peaceful home, like where he's most safe, where he's most wholesome, and then these Nazis come in and invade, these demon Nazis. Griffin becoming progressively more decomposed. The tube stalk and kill, the guy that's on the tube and then stalks and kill, and then the Piccadilly massacre. And so those are kind of the things that make this so special for me. And then we can kind of go through and talk about each one, but you know, again, we're talking about the opening sequence, and the slaughtered lamb is just so full of mystery. It's so fast when they go in there, and then everything just stops, and then there's a pentagram on the wall, so you're like, what is this place? And you start asking all those questions.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that cast of locals, man. They're just so local. You know, one guy, they're talking about the Alamo. I saw the Alamo. Like, isn't that film rather bloody? Bloody awful, if you ask me. Yeah,
awful. Their reaction to them is so funny because like they're laughing, they're joking, they come through the door and it's like just everything poof just stops, and they're staring at and then you're like, what is this place? What's going on? In retrospect, you look back and you're like, oh, they were not expecting anybody that's not from there. They were not expecting that to come there. And then, you know, as you realize, like, these people. So my question to you guys is why do you think that they wouldn't just say, you probably need to stay here? There's a crazy man out or whatever. Why would they let them leave? Like, what were they protecting within the town? And I have a theory, but I'm just curious what you guys think.
Were they protecting something, or did they just not give a fuck about American tourists?
Like,
but they do give a fuck because they leave and they're like they're conflicted about it and they feel horrible that they let him go. That's what
they eventually go out and shoot the werewolf.
Yeah.
That's them who do that. So yeah, that's the closest thing to a plot hole, you know, in this thing that I can really think about. It's like, why, if they're gonna nut up and go shoot the thing, why are they letting these two kids just go be eaten by it?
And that's something I think I think about all the time. Like when I watch the movie and I'm like, why wouldn't they just stay here? They don't have to tell them there's werewolves. They could just say, hey, there's a crazy man out. Why don't y'all just stay here? Because, I kind of get a sense the routine is when there's a full moon, they get together, they burn the candles under the pentagram, they, have beers and everything and have a good time and hang out until the moon's down. It's like a cultural thing. And I kind of think that the reason they do that is probably a lot of their friends and people they know in the community change. They don't want to kill them, so so that's why they
knew the werewolf.
I think they knew, and I think there's probably other werewolves. And
I don't think so.
Oh,
I'm going to disagree with you because what Jack keeps saying to him is, "You're the last one. We've got to end the bloodline." You're
right. Yeah. I get what I should clarify is there has been a cultural werewolves, like the pentagram. Like I think. Like they know the werewolf, so maybe there's periods. It's kind of like with your town feeding the pigs to the other side of there's like long periods where they don't have any werewolf activity. But every now and then something will pop up. Like recently, this popped up, and they're like, "Well, fuck, that's Nigel."
Well, and they clearly know the lore. They know, they know how to be protected. So somehow they have enough association with the werewolves that they've figured out how not to be eaten. Yeah.
Yeah, this is clearly their thing. This is a local problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I think that's one of the fascinating things about the movie is that this town is there and the werewolf is nothing new or not surprising to them. And then you're like, well, if they could have just shot the werewolf, why didn't they shot him earlier? It only makes sense to me that this was a member of the town. It's a close-knit town. And they're like, okay, we have plenty of sheep out for him, plenty of lambs. We go stay here. We have the pentagram. It doesn't fuck with us. And you could tell they were relaxed because they're laughing and joking and they were having a good time. But two tourists come in and they fuck up the whole thing.
Yep.
And when they come in, because the truck guy says, stick to the road, stay off the moors. They say, stick to the road, stay off the moors. So it's a cult. Like even people that are outside the bar know how to survive in werewolf territory. And the only thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around is like, there's so many things they could say to keep those kids to stay there. And then, and also werewolves don't attack on the road. It's just on the moors.
Yeah. I don't know.
You would know this, Christopher Buehlman. What is a moor?
A moor is just like, I guess like, hilly wild land in England, I think. I not really entirely sure. I've been on them, but I don't know if I could define them for you.
And to go back to what we were talking about earlier, Christopher, like the extreme distrust of outsiders in these little towns, like they're kind of, them inviting, first of all, this thing that they have that they're dealing with these werewolves or whatever, that's their problem and it's affecting their people. And they don't want other outsiders coming in and harming the people because maybe they found a way around it or somehow how to coexist with it or something.
And there's a strong sentiment in little communities like that problems in the community are handled by the community. You don't go to outsiders. You don't bring outsiders in to handle your problems. You handle it inside. So I absolutely could see them thinking, we're not going to call the police and let the police come muck around in our town. We're going to handle this inside.
One of the highlights for me is Rick Baker and the work he's done. And this, he did schlock with John Landis, but this is like his first real movie. He won an Oscar for this. But this is my favorite werewolf? Is this your guys' favorite werewolf design in any other werewolf movie? I know, Ty, I know you're a Twilight fan, but that's CGI. I'm talking like practical effects.
Yeah. I think it's the best. And this is I was hoping we were going to have a minute to talk about this because there was some talk around, those across the river got optioned for a while. And there was some talk around how to handle the monsters and if they're going to be classic monsters or if they want to sort of make them something new. What I was told at the time was that CGI just couldn't handle fur. And that's why you have a lot of werewolves in some of these movies looking like naked, muscular things. Because, But then I saw that bear attack in The Revenant, and I wondered, that's got to be CGI? But I think they tackled it because that looked real. That looked really good.
Look at the fur that Pixar does in like the Monsters movies. That's all CGI. They definitely the CGI got the ability to handle hair and fur. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
But is anything ever going to look as realistic as the transformation scene? And John Landis was talking about where he got the idea for American Werewolf in London in an interview. And he was doing Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia. And he was hanging out with Clint Eastwood and all the guys down there that were doing this thing. And they were driving from one location to the next location, and they saw a gypsy funeral. And in this gypsy funeral, they buried the guy head first into a hole where his feet were sticking up. And they buried him in there, and that's their tradition or that culture, or at least that's what he was told while he was watching this. And ultimately they do that so then they won't come back out later and do mischief. And so he thought the idea of coming back from the dead was fascinating. And then like you, Christopher, he was fascinated by werewolves. So he was like, I'm definitely doing a werewolf story, and I want the dead to come back. And these are the two things that I think he was 21 or 22 when he wrote this. What he wanted to do different is he was a fan, like I said earlier, he was a fan of werewolf movies, but he was never satisfied by the transformation scenes. And he says, and for me, since this being one of the first werewolf movies I saw, I don't know of any werewolf transformation that was painful like this before American Werewolf in London. And he said that what he wanted to do, number one, he wanted it in bright lights, no shadows, no tricks or anything like that. And number two, he wanted it to be extremely painful and take time with the transformation. Bones have to extend and then strengthen, and hair will come out. And so he just so happens that he did his first movie with a genius, with Rick Baker, and they created this transformation scene that I watched this movie last night, and it's still fascinating. Like, nothing about it feels dated. I mean, there are some things in the movie that feel dated that we'll get to, but this doesn't. It still is horrifying and satisfying and fascinating all at the same time. Yeah,
and poor Mickey has to watch the whole thing. The little Mickey Mouse doll just sitting there.
Little Mickey Mouse. Yeah, that was such a good. He contrasts that. He does that really well. He's got comedy, contrasts with horror. He plays these pop songs, these really light, like Blue Moon. Yep. And then he has Mickey staring at it. So he has that shift throughout the whole movie, and that's what is so unexpected and so horrifying. Seeing a vision of Mickey staring at this thing happening there's something just so perverse about it, like something so horrific about it.
I think that movie, it is the first one with what I call the hydraulic werewolves. Where he was using puppeteering and hydraulics to make those extending effects and that kind of stuff. A lot of people used it after that. I think Rick Baker invented all of that.
Wow.
What's fascinating is they were shooting The Howling while they were shooting American Werewolf in London, and Rick Baker was working on The Howling, and he was going to use all of these techniques for The Howling.
And he did. So I love the transformations in The Howling.
Yeah. Right.
That is good too. Yeah. I've often said that, how curious it is that the two best and maybe the two only truly, truly excellent werewolf movies both came out the same year.
And it's interesting that Rick Baker worked on both of them, but John Landis showed Rick Baker the script years ago for American Werewolf in London and was like, how could we do the transformation and everything like that? They became good friends. They were going to do the movie, but Landis couldn't get the movie off the ground. So then he got the job with The Howling, and he was developing all these werewolf things. Landis had no idea that he was working on another werewolf movie. He calls him and says, guess what? I got American Werewolf in London off the ground. We're going to do this. And he's like, well, I'm already halfway into this movie called The Howling. And he was like, what? He got fucking furious. He was like, and then Rick Baker was like, okay, all right. And he quit The Howling and put his protege in charge, and then went and did American Werewolf in London. He quit halfway through and went and did American Werewolf in London and won an Oscar for it.
Yeah, on your list of things that you appreciate about it, I'd like to add a thing that I appreciate about it very much too. And I will say that every time I watch this film, my retroactive crush on Jenny Agutter gets deeper and stronger.
Oh, yeah.
God, I'm so sorry I missed her. I can't believe I missed her. I have such a crush on her too.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
She is the reason to watch Logan's Run.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. She's the reason to watch Logan's Run.
Was Logan's? Yep. Oh, yeah. Logan's Run was before this.
Yeah.
Before this movie.
Yep. Oh, she is so cute.
I'm so glad you brought her up.
Oh, she's like a sapiophile's dream, I mean, she's so damn smart. and clever and direct and brave. I mean, she's kind of a perfect love interest character. I mean, she's amazing.
So I've heard some people say in the movie, they're like, wait a minute, this guy thinks he's a werewolf and he's obviously losing his mind. They think it's implausible that she would bring him home. And I completely disagree. I think it was properly set up that she's extremely empathetic. She really cares about her patients. And the fact that this guy is damaged and dealing with something in the guilt of losing his friend is why she's attracted to him. And that's why it works for me. And that's one of the things that's so appealing about her.
Watching her deal with that little kid who goes, no.
No. Yeah, she's so sweet to him.
About the head and neck. No, I thought not.
I think, Christopher, one of the things that I really like about your book and the werewolves in your book is like the older they get, the more in control of their transformation. It's almost like the more integrated their human soul and their wolf soul gets in with each other and they have control over it. And to me, that's when it starts to get terrifying, because I think that the disconnect for me in werewolf movies is, number one, you get a month in between when the full moons where they transform. So there's something about like kind of slows the pace down where it's like, well, I got a month, so I just, I can get away from you or whatever. And then second, when they are the werewolf, if something is mindless, like if something's just a savage, mindless thing, that's less scary to me when something is intelligent and has a conscience and is coming after you for a reason.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of one of my disconnects from typical werewolves. And I think the reason that I love this movie so much is it goes into the psyche, the transformation of like the human spirit into the wolf spirit and evil, something evil.
Yeah, no, it does that very well. And another sort of deeper level this has than most of these stories is that it is exploring the ethics of being a werewolf. I mean, this guy is being told to kill himself again and again, and he doesn't do it, and then that costs lives, and he has to deal with that.
My favorite scene in the movie is when they're in the theater and they're like debating on how he should kill himself. And then,
Yes.
And he's like, don't hang yourself, it'll hurt your neck. And they're like, I don't care if his neck hurts. And then and then the nice couple is like, why don't you just put a gun to your head and pull the trigger?
Pills. The bitch with the pills.
Pills.
That is one of the elements of this movie that works both as horror and as comedy, because obviously they're very funny. But this idea that everywhere you go, you're dragging around a peanut gallery of dead people who are just talking all the time and telling you what you should do and stuff, that's horrifying to me. Like, part of the reason that I don't believe in ghosts, I mean, other than, science, the other reason is I don't like the idea that dead people are like watching us all the time, right? People are like, oh, you don't believe in ghosts? You don't believe your parents, who've passed on are watching out for you? I'm like, the shit you get up to? You want your parents watching that?
Yeah. Especially like watching a Monica Bellucci movie or something like that. It's like, I don't want them watching me then.
I can't have them watching me. I gotta watch this movie.
They hear that old noise of coming from the modem of the internet coming on. And they just explode out of the room like.
What was that? What's that movie we always talk about, Ty? Is like Life Forms, or like where it was like one of the sexiest movie. Life Force.
Life Force. I love Life Force.
Like, get out of the movie. Grandma, you might want to leave the room. I'm about to watch Life Force.
Yeah. No, the first time I watched Life Force, I was with a couple of buddies, and I had a moment there where I was like, should other people be here right now? This feels very private. Have you seen Life Force, Christopher?
I have not. But I understand the sentiment. When I did the Christoph the Insulter show, and I did this extremely R-rated insult comedy at Ren Fairs, I'd be like, I'm not saying that children absolutely shouldn't watch it. This depends on the kid, and I'm not saying adults shouldn't, but you just probably shouldn't watch it together. Just decide which of you is going to watch it.
Yes,
my favorite sequence in this movie that I think this movie's at its scariest, and I kind of wish they continued this way, is the tube stalk.
Yep.
When he's stalking the guy in the tube. and you just see shadows, you hear growls, and you see the guy, and he's just alone down there, and he's running. And when he's going up the escalator, and then you just see it slowly walk out far away, and you see the snarl, like that, terrifying me.
I want to tell you that in the book, Those Across the River, I very consciously put in a nod to that scene. There's a scene where Franck is up at the top of the stairs, and the thing comes from the kitchen, and I was purposely mimicking the choreography of the reveal. Yeah.
It's what I envision in my head, and I love the cannon when it like he lights the cannon and blows the fuck out of the werewolf coming out there when he's going up the stairs.
Well, and I like
spoons and shit through him.
In the book, what I like about that is it's not clean. He blows himself up too. He tears like it has the horrifying side effects that setting off a cannon inside of your own house would have, which I appreciated. Burns his hand and deafens him. And
this is before Serve Pro. It's not like nothing ever happened. You got to clean up your own homicide.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell Ty, that Ty and I talk about a lot, after he read the book, or that I really appreciated about the book, having somebody that's been in the military, I love the fact when he goes back to his boys that he served with. I mean, he had to give one guy a car, but he's like, okay, guys, there's some werewolves that are living, under a rock over a river, and I got to go kill these motherfuckers. And they're like, all right, I'm with it. Let's go. And I'm like, hell yeah. And then and then you're like, do you believe that? He goes, I believe that you believe it. And that's enough for me. And I'm coming there for you. And I'm like, you goddamn right. That's what it would be like.
After Wes and I had both read the book, we talked about it. And I asked him, I was like, if one of your buddies from your Navy days rolled up to your house and said, dude, my town is full of werewolves and I need you to help me kill them, would you go? And Wes was like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's roll out. let's do it.
Who's driving? Who's driving? Like even all the guys that I grew up with in high school that all live, I'm in Georgia right now, and they all live like up north or whatever, and all we grew up with. If I hadn't spoke to them in 10 years and I called them and be like, there's a fucking werewolf in my town, and I think it's got a thing for me. Could you come? I think we, you and I and a few other guys, I think we could fuck this werewolf up. And they'd be like, all right, you owe me Taco Bell. And then I was on the car, and then they're over there, I haven't talked to you in 10 years, but I'm on my way.
Yep. Yeah.
This is making me feel like a bad friend, because if any of my friends called and told me that, I'd be like, this sounds like you have a problem.
Oh, I'd be out there, Ty.
It depends on the friend.
Yeah, Ty, if you told me that you're pretty sure there's some zombies outside of your forest of where you live that kind of come at night and try to get in the house, so you think you're going to have to clean them up one night, I'll say, all right, but I'd make you buy my plane ticket.
If there were zombies trying to get in my house, I'm just going to hand Janae a gun and get out of the way. I got Annie Oakley over here. I don't know. The thing that's making me feel like a bad friend is that idea that there are people in your life that if they called you and gave you an incredibly implausible, horrific story and asked for your help, that you would just drop everything and go help them. I love that idea, and I love that there are people out there like that, and I know I'm not that guy. I'd be like, oh, that sounds like a really bad problem you got there. You should probably take care of that. You should probably call somebody who will actually come help you. I'm staying here. I'm staying in my house.
And then, we get to the Piccadilly Massacre. And you know how John Landis, so they haven't shot any film at Piccadilly in 14 years. And how he got it done is he invited the whole police precinct, the whole London police precinct, to come to a screening of Blues Brothers. And he basically was like, hey, come out. And he bought him food and beer and was like, come watch this movie. And then they watched the movie and they were blown away by Blues Brothers and that he shot that. By the way, fun side note, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd were almost the two guys in the movie.
Oh, no shit.
John Landis, yes. John Landis, because he was shooting Blues Brothers. He was getting this off the ground. The studios were a bit apprehensive because they were like, wait, was this a comedy? Is this a horror? They didn't, I was like we talked about before, they haven't seen anything like this. And one of the ways to solve that problem is Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, because they already are well known, because his original plan was to cast unknown actors. And because he was doing Blues Brothers, he was going to have them in this. And I think about if that movie would have happened. I rarely do this with like something that is, I don't know. What do you guys think how that would have turned out?
Which one would have been the werewolf and which one would have been the decaying friend?
I think John Belushi would be the decaying friend. He was had the comedic load to carry, and I think Dan Aykroyd had kind of that all-American kind of look, kind of sweet face to him at that time. So I think that would have been the best way to do it. But it isn't listed to like which one was supposed to be what. But I think John Belushi would be hilarious coming back and like decomposing and having
that's why I'm asking, because if John Belushi is playing the decaying friend, I think it tips it more to the comedy side though.
That's the hard thing, is it does tip it to the comedy side, but Dan Aykroyd, he does have a performance style where it is contained. He is the straight man. He can do that. And so if John Belushi is the comedic relief, which the other guy was when he came in, he was funny as the decomposing guy, I think it could still work. And I think in some ways it would be more interesting, because Dan Aykroyd is not that kind of comedic actor. He's more of the deadpan kind of a thing. Yeah. And so I don't know. It fascinates me, and I would be fascinated to see that movie. But I think, usually when you hear things like when there's a classic movie like this, you're like, it wouldn't have been better. This one, I'm like, I would want to see that. I would be curious to see what that movie would have been like.
I don't know if it would be better, but I would like to visit the alternate reality where it exists so I could watch it. Yeah.
I would like that too, but I would like to then come back to this one and be able to keep this close to perfect as movies get movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
During the Piccadilly Massacre, we all agree this is a perfect movie. We're going a deep dive on it. We're talking about things. Is there something that could have made it more perfect? And because the tube scene was so terrifying and so well done, I kind of agree with John Landis, where he kind of looks back and he was like, in retrospect, I think I showed too much of the wolf and I kind of let some of the tension out at the end, as the climax. He goes, I was just so enamored with it at the time. And I kind of agree with that. I think that seeing so much, like, you have the transformation, and that's like the most I want to see, and then go back into the shadows. And that's why the tube thing is so scary and so fascinating. I think I would have liked a little bit more breathing room at the end and not see so much of the wolf running and things like that.
It's the Jaws problem. Being forced to show less of the monster makes the movie better. Spielberg wanted a lot of Jaws in Jaws. It didn't work. The robot didn't work. And so they had to cut it down to the minimum. It made it a much better movie. Ridley Scott had the same problem with Alien. Every time he tried to film the alien doing stuff, it just looked like a guy in a rubber suit. So he cut it down to the minimum. So there's very few scenes of the full length alien in the movie Alien. It's rarely there. That is a lesson that all directors should pay attention to. And I think Landis is right. If he had cut it down to the minimum, it would have been more powerful. It would have been scarier, all of that stuff. I think his instincts are totally correct.
Yeah, yes, and that scene in the tube is perfect. They showed the monster in that scene just long enough. I mean, it isn't quite like a glimpse, like what the hell is it? You know what it is, but then it's snatched away from you at just the moment your mind wraps around what it is you're seeing. But the Piccadilly scene, maybe there's a bit much of it, but I really like sort of just the orgiastic nature of the carnage in that scene. It's like, not only is this fucking thing running around snapping at people, and I often wondered, did it bite somebody? In that scene. Of
course it did. It bought it bit a lot of people.
Look like it did. So I guess those dead people are going to have to still hang out for a while, because that bloodline does not look over to me.
Yeah. David's like, motherfucker.
They're just like, oh, we should have taken the pills.
What's David going to look like in like 20 years? I mean, he's already a skeleton pretty much. Does his dust follow them around?
He'll get an urn.
He'd be like a talking urn like that.
Well, but see, the other dead people are not decaying like that. So maybe do you hit like a point of equilibrium where you like, that's as decayed as you get? I don't know. What is the lore?
They're freshly dead. Other dead. Yeah. Yeah. The other dead people you see are fresh.
Right.
Yeah.
They're freshly dead. So John Landis wrote a sequel to this where Debbie Klein, who David's always talking about banging through the whole movie, when he's like, and I love like her ongoing story, because even when he was dead, he would come back and want to talk about Debbie Klein. And he was like, Debbie Klein came to my funeral And she cried a lot, but then she ended up and then he's like, then she ended up banging some, but she would come back to try to figure out what happened to the guy that she has this massive crush on. And I guess the studio didn't like the story. And Landis was like, well, I'm not writing another draft or I'm not doing anything different. And so, but the studio liked the idea and wanted to make another American Werewolf in London. But because Landis backed out of it, then they had to do the American Werewolf. And we won't even say the name of the other movie they did.
The only thing good about that movie was where I was when I watched it. And I was in Santiago, Chile, and it was Halloween night, 1999. That's all I really remember about it.
Were you looking forward to it because of it's one of your favorite movies and everything? Yeah. And
of course I was. Yeah.
So disappointed.
I had heard that it was bad, though.
Yeah.
So
I remember because it came. Obviously, I out of my parents' house for a decade by the time the second one came out, and I was looking forward to it. And then all of the early press on it was like, "This is not good. If you loved the first one, don't see this one."
Well, and you think too, like the first one, it's a movie that you watch and you're like, "How the fuck did he do this?" It is so hard to do what he did.
Yeah.
To achieve that tone. I mean, Shaun of the Dead, another movie that I can think that is like as well done as something like this, where it's funny but genuinely scary, genuinely moving, has all these things. But that's a hard fucking. You either got to be a comedy and you have horror as a backdrop, or you're horror with some funny moments, or it's camp.
Yep.
But to do something that's genuinely funny and genuinely scary, it is a hard tightrope to walk, and he was the first. So there's some movies that just have magic in the film, that when they make it, it's just something magical about it happens. This movie had magic, and so if you're going to remake something like this, you got to have John Landis involved, or somebody that has that skill set, because John Landis is a lover of horror movies and a lover of comedy. He's funny, but he also understands fear.
I think I have a movie, an earlier film that does horror and comedy and is not expressly one or the other. And it was a pretty good film. It's not an American film. I can't even remember the title of it now, but it was a Russian movie. And was from the 60s. Mm-hmm. And it was about a dude who had to keep vigil over a witch in a church. And it was fucked up. It was like drugs. There were drugs involved in the Soviet Union when they made this movie. There was a scene though where this knobby looking witch comes up to this dude and she effectively turns him into her horse and rides him. She just fucking rides him up into the sky. And it's creepy. Some of the scenes are creepy as fuck, but it's also very funny. And I wish I could remember the name. It's like
Joseph, are you trying to find the name?
I'm looking right now. The only thing that I did
we got to get the name for this.
Did a quick search. Is this the movie?
Yes, that's it.
That's it. I have to find the scene that you're talking about. I mean, they're saying it's like one of the greatest movies.
What year?
It's good.
67.
Good job.
Yeah,
Christopher
all right.
Buehlman. All right,
we got to watch that now.
Yeah, that's got to be a thing. We got to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Joseph, you got top 5 for us?
Oh, before we do it, I gotta say, so Wes saying that the Piccadilly Circus scene would have been more horrific, stronger, with less of the full-length werewolf on camera. It's not a great movie. But there is a scene in Silver Bullet where the werewolf is killing all the townspeople are out hunting the werewolf. They're all out, tromping through the woods with their shotguns to hunt the werewolf down. And there is a fog, so it's like hard to see, where the werewolf kills almost everybody in the town, and you never see it once. You just see people disappearing into the fog. You just see people getting yanked into the fog and screaming. So I think when Wes was describing he wanted to see less of the werewolf, I totally thought of that scene from Silver Bullet.
What do you guys think of werewolves walking on hind legs? Where are you?
I think they should be able to do both. I think when a werewolf runs, it should run on all fours, and I think it can stand up like a bear to be scary.
I agree with that, but once I see a werewolf running like a man, it just takes it out. Like you need the wolf aspect.
Yep.
Like you just can't have fur and long teeth and be a wolf. Like you got to be able to fucking haul ass.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it scary because you can't get away from it.
Well, and that's the thing that Ridley Scott learned with Alien is anytime he showed the alien walking, it completely broke the suspension of disbelief. because it just looked like a man.
Yeah.
It just looked like a man then. So he had to find ways to show the alien, but he never moving from place to place, but he never showed it just walking because that's what messed it up.
If I see a wolf throw a punch like a man or something like that, it just completely takes me out of it because you're like,
what
wait
about
a minute,
wolf that's like Jean-Claude Van Damme and he's just kicking ass?
yeah, or something like that. Because then it's like, why be a fucking wolf? And then if you fight like a man, it's like, well, I feel like I can do something against that. But if you're ripping people's heads off or biting their arms off, it's like, what are you going to do against that?
Right.
You know.
We're heading into were-kangaroo territory now. We're going to get a boxing.
Let's get to the top 5. We got top 5 best werewolf movies. I think we all know what number 1 is, I assume.
Die Hard?
Yeah.
I'm going to put my vote in for a movie that I have great affection for is Ginger Snaps. I love Ginger Snaps.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Oh, good call. That was like 2000. That movie came out like 2000.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to argue for the next one being The Howling.
Yeah.
The Howling.
I love
really
The Howling.
good.
Yeah, I think that's
I
think
will
that's
also
right.
say Wolfen is not a werewolf movie. It's
Correct.
not. It's actual wolves. It's not werewolves.
Evolved.
Yep.
It's evolved wolves. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a Silver Bullet fan. I know there's some cheese dick shit in there, but I really love that movie.
I love the scene in the fog, man, when the werewolf is yanking people into the fog and murdering them.
Yeah, I love Corey Haim being in his like that motorcycle wheelchair thing, and
Dog Soldiers is also great. I do love Dog Soldiers. I don't know if we want to do that one next, but I do love that movie.
I like the combination of genres, the werewolf horror with action.
Yeah.
I enjoy that, and I like the zombie situation, but with werewolves being trapped in a confined space.
Get that underworld trash out of here. Get it out of here.
There's a movie. There's a movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called Were. WER, and it's European. It's a French werewolf movie, and it's worth a look. I would put that on my personal top 5. Probably.
Well, I've seen American Werewolf in Paris. I do not believe the French can do anything good with werewolves.
No,
I'm not going to blame them.
They lost their werewolf card.
Yeah.
What was the French movie where the monster's a lion? Where they had like a lion that roams
Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Yeah, that's Brotherhood of the Wolf. That's why I was saying it's not a werewolf movie.
So is this our top 5, or are we going to debate like Teen Wolf, Werewolves Within, Werewolf by Night?
Here's the thing. I love Teen Wolf.
Okay, I'm not a Teen Wolf fan.
I love it. It was like
him. He was too old for it.
It was in my Michael J. Fox love affair. But Teen Wolf, to me, I mean, I guess you can't argue that it's a werewolf movie, but it's just not what we're talking about here. Like, you can't have it in the same category as American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
And I think Howling is a good number 2 because it's like the B team of American Werewolf in London.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it. Yeah. Frankly, I don't have a top 5 list. I kind of have a top 2 list, and then everything else. Honestly,
have you seen Ginger Snaps?
Genre. I have, yeah.
Okay, you didn't like it?
I liked it better the first time. The second time I watched it, I wasn't as into it. I think it gets. I like a traditional monster too,
right.
And it gets freaky at the end. I love the concept that it's talking about. I love the idea of dawning sexuality and that.
Yeah.
I think it's very smart, but it doesn't completely do it for me. That's all.
Alrighty, should we look at what the patrons had?
Sure.
Yeah.
Ty's going to be very disappointed with them for one of the movies.
Oh, God. What do they do?
Number 2.
Get it out of there.
Underworld.
Get it out of there.
Teen Wolf. I'm not mad at Teen Wolf, but the Howling and the Silver. Oh, so they were doing pretty well.
It was a virtual tie for that.
All right.
Yeah. After that, Ginger Snaps was behind that, but yeah. American Werewolf it wasn't even close.
Anybody who thinks Underworld is better than Ginger Snaps needs to have their head examined.
I'll support you on that statement. Yeah, I think Ginger Snaps definitely better. There was a movie called Howl.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen that one.
I have. Yep.
Yeah, I kind of like that one. Funnily enough, I was actually in England on the night I suspect inspired the movie, because there was a night when I was out with a friend. It was Valentine's Day, like 2014. And there was this big fucking storm, and all these trees fell on the tracks. So everybody had to just basically get taxis,
Right.
out to wherever they were going to go. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that was the night.
I think the reason I like the Richard Matheson I Am Legend book so much, which scared me, and kind of which I think makes werewolves work so well, is like that the vampires still had an echo of their consciousness. Not vampire, zombies. Like they still had a bit of what made them human, and they could use that to manipulate him to get what they want. And like the zombie that was like on the street that was like, flashing her boobs at him and like all that stuff, because she was like, oh, I can get him out with sexuality. Or they would talk about situations they had in the past and everything. That terrifies me, because it's like there's echoes of the consciousness within them, and they can use that to manipulate the situation. So if werewolves have a bit more control, like with your werewolves, that the older they get, the more they can kind of get control over it, and the naked kid in the woods, and
The naked kid in the woods is super creepy.
It's super creepy, and he's always trying to bait them deeper in the woods.
Yep.
And it's just, it fucking terrifies me, because it's like that little motherfucker knows what he's doing. It's not like there's going to be a full moon and he's going to change and not have control. No, he's like playing with these people, and it is like, I think the scariest people are like, is kids with that kind of power, to do that kind of violence. Because I mean, if you look at some of the most violent soldiers, is like the children's soldiers. Yeah. It's like, and so, if a kid has werewolf power and is, too not mature enough to really understand what that means and how to hold it, and like killing people is just a game for that little kid, it scares the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kid was a creeper, for sure.
Yeah. And everybody should go out and get the book, Those Across the River. Fantastic.
Those Across the River.
Fantastic werewolf book. But yeah, the scene where the kid first shows up is one of my favorite scenes in the book, because it's so weird, it's so unexpected. What it leads to is so surprising that I hadn't ever read that scene in a book, and I've read a lot of books. So every time I'm reading a book, I'm like, oh, this is like scene X in X book, right? Like your brain is always doing that. That was just like, I've never read this scene before. This is not a scene that is reminiscent of anything else. And I love when I experience those moments reading.
And Franck is funny in that scene when he sees the kid and he's just like taking shots at him, and like, oh, yeah, no pants, huh? It must be nice. Like, it's summer, it gets hot, I get it,
Frank's a relatable guy.
Yeah. We thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you for coming out. We are a big fan of you, and we'll keep talking about your books, and we got to figure out the next movie to have you on, because if we think about The Lesser Dead, we can, what we could do, what would pair well with The Lesser Dead? Near Dark.
Oh, Near Dark, yeah.
The movie Near Dark.
That would actually that would actually pair better with the Suicide Motor Club, because the Suicide Motor Club is vampires, but they're motorheads. They're out on the road and they're traveling. And
I haven't read that one yet.
It's got really similar things. I think that Let the Right One In would be a good match.
We'll do that
one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. The original, not the remake. Look, I love Chloe. But the remake is not a worthy remake.
Yeah, that would be a good pair. See, we pair books with movies like wine with like a nice dish. It's like, we'll talk about this book and then we'll talk about this movie. And that's good. Let the Right One In. That'd be a good one to do. So we got to have you back on. But let me close this out, because I'm got to go to my kids' play.
Yep, go to your play.
Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks to our good friend Christopher Buehlman. And thank you to Tyrannosaurus Rex. We love you guys. Please like, subscribe. Please go out and buy Those Across the River. Do you like this cover, or do you like the one with the wolf? The one with the wolf on it, with the werewolf on it.
Oh man, that's a tough question. I like the original better of those two.
All right, go read the book. We love you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Please like and subscribe. Ring that little bell. Every time you ring a bell, Ty gets his horns.